All right, take your seats, please. Take your seats, please. Take your seats, please. Let's see here. Joshua, Judges, Ruth.
We're ready, Jeremiah.
We're ready. Okay, perfect. All right, folks, if I could have your attention, please. I know we're getting started a little bit late tonight, and so I want to make sure we get as much time. Shh. All right, if you can hear me, clap once. If you can hear me, clap twice. If you can hear me, clap 3 times. Okay, really quick before we jump into lesson tonight, I did mention it in worship, but I want to mention it again. Reminder, hopefully you got this through the email, that next Wednesday is the makeup for tubing at Buena Vista. So we will not be having class. We'll be pushing that class back and combining some of the stuff later in the schedule. And so next week, no lesson, nothing happening here for confirmation. 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock will be tubing at Buena Vista. The permission form, waiver form was attached to the email. If you need them, they will also be available at Buena Vista. I had the question asked, thank you, Bruce, if it's also open to other family members. We're kind of needing to restrict it just to confirmation kids and club kids because that's already kind of pushing the limits of how many people we can fit on the hill. So I think the cost is $15, waiver form, 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock at the Chalet for Buena Vista next week. Again, that was in the email. If you didn't get that, let me know. We can get you that information. Okay, I want to jump into where we're going for this week. So welcome, confirmation, those of you here, those of you joining online. Good to be back talking about which testament again? Which testament? Old Testament. Yes, we're talking about the Old Testament. Now, who could tell me what we talked about last time we were talking about the Old Testament? Anybody remember? Who are we talking about? One more time? David and, not Gabriel. Gabriel's an angel. David and Goliath was part of it, but there was another king. We had 2 kings, right? I can find the thing here somewhere. There it is, the tale of 2 kings. We had David and, yes, Saul. That's right. Which of the 2 of them was the first king? David or Saul? Saul, that's right. Saul was the first king. And who was it who made Saul king? God did, because God talked to somebody. Do you guys remember who it was that God talked to anoint Saul as the king? This guy. Samuel, that's right. Samuel was the prophet who God said, okay, if the people really want a king, we can have Saul be the king, and that's cool, and I'll try to help him out. Did that work out very well? It did not. Was Saul a very good king? He was not. So, after Saul turns out to be not so good a king, then we have David, who is anointed to be the next king. Now, David had a pretty big family, right? Do you guys remember his family and what we talked about with that? He had a bunch of brothers, right? Was David the biggest, strongest guy in his whole family? He was not. That's right. He had a bunch of older brothers who were big and strong and really tough looking, but he was the kind of not so tough looking guy, and yet he was the one who God chose because God looks at the heart. Right? And he knew that David had great potential within him to be a wonderful king, which he was in many ways. He did a lot of really cool things for the people of Israel. Was he a perfect king? He was not. Who can remember some of the things that maybe he did a little wrong? Right here, Bree. He slept with somebody else's wife. He sleeps with Bathsheba, who was married to one of his most loyal soldiers. Now, was that the end of that story of how he slept with this person's wife? Trinity. Yeah, exactly, because Uriah, the guy who was married to Bathsheba, was his soldier, and so he has the whole army kind of retreat when Uriah is fighting a battle with them. And so, of course, Uriah ends up getting killed. So not only does David end up sleeping with this guy's wife, he basically murders him in order to get away with it. So clearly not a perfect guy. And hopefully we're not guilty of some of those things, but all of us are also imperfect, right? And so one of the things we learn from this story is that God can even use people who are broken in pretty big ways to accomplish some pretty cool things. And so David ends up being kind of, even though not perfect, one of the greatest kings of ancient Israel. So tonight we are going to dive into a story of someone who was actually related to David, but going back a few generations. We've kind of come forward out of the time of Judges to the time of Kings, and now we're going to go back again into the time of Judges. And who can remember, who were the judges? Anybody remember? When we talk about judges in ancient Israel, let's go over here with Isaac. Yeah, when the people of Israel were kind of falling away and were kind of having a bad time, the judges are the people that God called to kind of be leaders and to kind of bring them back into the fold and to bring them back to prosperity. So we're looking in the time of Judges at a particular family. We're going to be learning a little bit about someone named Ruth. And Ruth is someone who is, starting in the beginning of the story, is not one of God's people. She's not a child of Israel. She's from a country called Moab, which is totally not part of the in crowd, right? They're kind of, sometimes they're even enemies of the Israelite people. And we're going to learn a little bit about how she figures into the story. Because, like I said, she's related to David, who was one of the great kings of Israel, even though she was an outsider to this royal family. So before we jump into this, we're going to do a little bit of reader's theater. We're going to read some of the story. And so I want you guys to take out your Bibles, and we're going to turn to the book of Ruth. Okay? Grab your Bibles. If you don't have one with you, grab one out of the pew. And we are going to turn to Ruth, which is in the Old Testament, following Joshua and Judges. Then comes Ruth. All right? It's a pretty short book. See if you can find it. If you need to use the table of contents, you certainly can. And we're also going to have some volunteers, if I can get some, that are going to help us read some of this stuff. But before we do that, there's a few names in the story that we're going to read that are kind of hard to pronounce, kind of hard to understand, and I want to walk through them before we actually take turns reading. So, we're going to start off easy. On the screen, what name is this? Ruth, and that's how you say it. Exactly, Ruth. Great. Glad you guys can get that one. Okay, a little bit harder. Naomi, very good. This is another person in the story. Okay, so we got Ruth, we got Naomi, going a little bit harder now. We got somebody named Boaz. There we go. His name is Boaz, okay? Now, I've already used this word once. Kind of sounds like Boaz, but instead it's Moab, right? It's that other country that was involved next to Israel. And so a person from Moab might be called a Moabite. Okay, so if I'm from Moab, then I am someone called a Moabite. So for example, Ruth is from Moab, and she is called a Moabite. Okay? All right, here's one that we might know. What is this one? Bethlehem. Why do we know Bethlehem? Who's from Bethlehem? Jesus, that's right. Jesus is born in Bethlehem, right? Right, Ava? Is that what you're going to say? We talked about Bethlehem. Absolutely. It's known as the city of David for a reason that we're going to get to tonight. So we got Bethlehem, and then here is the kicker. This is one that I love so much. Who thinks they know how to pronounce this one? Let's go right here. Emelech. I like it. I don't know if I've heard that pronunciation before, but it's a good one. Back here. Elamech. Could be, maybe. I don't know. I've never actually met the guy. Yep, go ahead. Elamech, maybe, could be. Any other ideas about what it might be? What? Elamech, could be, very well. Al? That might probably be a little bit easier. I would say Elimelech, but again, I never met him, so maybe he wouldn't pronounce it that way. But I'm going to say Elimelech for now. And Elimelech is going to kind of figure pretty prominently in this story too. So let's review from the start. We've got Al. There we go. Al, or Elimelech, or one of a variety of other ways. Okay, great. So, those of you, I hope you found the book of Ruth. Raise your hand if you found the book of Ruth. Fantastic. You guys are great. We are going to start in the beginning with chapter 1, verse 1. And I have up here some papers with some selections. We're going to kind of read through the story. We're going to skip around a few points. We don't want to read the whole book, but I want to hit the main points. Do I have a volunteer to read? Bree, you want to come on up? Okay, Bree's going to come up. I'm going to read the first section, and then I'll have Bree read the second one, okay? So this first one, you can follow along in your Bibles, is Ruth chapter 1, verses 1 through 5. And this one's got a lot of those names we mentioned, including a couple others. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. What's a famine? Who knows what a famine is? Yeah, Ava. A family is a group of people living together. Yep. And this kind of sounds like that, but it's a different word. Famine is, Maren? Sickness. Sometimes sickness goes along with it, but it's got a specific other thing. Yeah. Poverty. Yeah, it kind of goes with that. Starvation is the biggest piece. A famine is when there's just not enough food for everybody. And so a lot of sickness goes with that. Poverty goes with that. But there's a famine in the beginning of the story in the land of Israel. So there's a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem in Judah went to live in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons, because there was maybe some food in Moab. The name of the man was Elimelech, or Al. And the name of his wife was Naomi. And the name of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem in Judah. Ephrathites. Ephrathites from Bethlehem in Judah. This is why I'm reading this part. They went into the country of Moab and remained there. But Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. They took Moabite wives, and the name of one was Orpah, and the name of the other was Ruth. That's right. When they had lived there for about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion also died, so that the woman was left without her 2 sons or her husband. So, in this story so far, we've got this family. We've got Elimelech, we've got Naomi, and their 2 kids go and live in Moab because there's food there. And while they're there, the 2 sons marry wives, so they've got a family that's growing. But then the dad dies and the 2 sons also die. So they're left kind of in a tough spot because at this time in Israel, a lot of the economic well-being was centered around the men in the family because the women didn't really have a way in that culture of earning a living. So they were kind of in a tough spot. We're going to continue with Bree reading for us verse 6 through 9. And you can read this section. Just talking to this microphone here.
Then she started to return with her daughters-in-law from the country of Moab, for she had heard in the country of Moab that the Lord had consideration for his people and had given them food. So she set out from the place where she had been living, she and her 2 daughters-in-law, and they went on their way to go back to the land of Judah. But Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go back, each of you, to your mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you, as you have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant that you may find security, each of you, in the house of your husband." Then she kissed them, and they wept aloud. Thank you so much, Bree. You can head on back. So what's happening now is that Naomi hears that there's food back in the land of Judah, where she's from, in Bethlehem. And so she doesn't have any way to support herself here in Moab, so she's going to head back to where she hopefully has some family that might be able to take care of her in Bethlehem. But she also has these 2 daughters-in-law, the 2 women who married her sons before they died, and they all love each other very much. And so they're really in a tough spot because the 2 women who married her sons are not Israelites, right? They're not part of the tribes of Israel, and so they'd be outsiders back in Bethlehem. And so she tells them, stay here. Go to the homes of your family. Have them take care of you. I'm going to miss you so much, but this is for your own good. You need to be safe. You'll be safe here at home. And so they kind of hug and they weep and they cry, but they kind of decide this is probably for the good. At least most of them decide. 2 of the 3 decide that's probably for the good. Do I have anybody else who'd be willing to read the next section up here? Let's go. Isaac, come on up. We got lots of sections, so hopefully we'll have chances for people that want to read. All right.
And for those of you following along in your Bibles, this is going to be verses 16 through 18. Chapter 1, verses 16 through 18. So you can find that, you can follow along. And this section right here, Isaac, if you want to read from into the microphone.
But Ruth said, "Do not press me to leave you or to turn back from following you. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, your God, my God. Where you die, I will die. Where will I be buried?
There I will be buried. Yep.
Or there I will be buried. May the Lord do thus and so to me, and more as well, if even death parts me from you." When Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more to her.
Thank you so much. Great job. So, Ruth's not too much into this idea of leaving her mother-in-law. She loves her mother-in-law so much. She says, "I don't want to leave you. And even though you're going to a place that I know nothing about, I've never been before, and I'll be an outsider, I need to go with you. I cannot let you go because you are my family. I want to go where you go, wherever that is. I will live where you live. I will worship your gods because they're your gods. Just don't send me away." And so Naomi relents, and the two of them make their way back to the land of Israel, to Bethlehem. All right, who wants to read the next section? Let's go right over here. We'll come back. I've got a few other spots, so come on up. All right, and so this is going to be verses 22, chapter 1, verses 22 through chapter 2, verse 3. Yep, the one on the top there.
22, oh God.
You're all right. So Naomi
returned together with Ruth as the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, who came back with her from the country of
Moab, yep.
Moab. They came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest, now named Naomi.
Yep, Naomi.
Naomi had a kinsman on her husband's side, a prominent rich man of the family of
Elimelech, or Al.
whose name was Boaz. And Ruth and Moabite said to Naomi, "Let me go to the field and glean among the ears of grain behind someone in whose sight I may find favor." She said to her, "Go, my daughter." So she went. She came and gleaned in the field behind the reapers. As it happened, she came to the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was the family of El.
Thank you very much. Awesome. Yes. Great job. So, Naomi and Ruth head back to Bethlehem, and they get there, and it's the beginning of the barley harvest. Now, barley is a grain, right? And Naomi has a kinsman. What's a kinsman? Anybody know what a kinsman means? A close relative, exactly. A kinsman is a close relative. She has a close relative from the family of Elimelech whose name is Boaz. And Boaz has a field of grain. So Ruth goes out into the field where Boaz's workers are working, and she's gleaning the grain. That's kind of a strange term that we don't really talk about too much these days. Does anybody happen to know what it means to glean or what gleaning is? I'll tell you. So in a harvest, there's almost always a little bit left over on the edges, at least in ancient times. When the reapers would come in and just cut all the grain down, there'd be a little left over that they wouldn't pick up because it was such a small amount. And those were called the gleanings, the leftovers. And the people who really had no way of supporting themselves, like the widows and the orphans and those who were lepers, would come and take those gleanings, those leftovers. And that was called going out to glean the fields. So they would at least have something to eat. They could go and find the things that the reapers didn't pick, and they could take them home to eat. So that's what Naomi's doing at this place, at the family of Boaz, who is a relative of Elimelech. So she gets noticed by Boaz. Do I have someone who would like to read? I see a hand over here, green. Yes, right in the back. Come on up. I know you've had your hand up for a while. All right, and this is going to be chapter 2, verses 8 through 12. Okay, chapter 2, verses 8 through 12. All right. Right here.
Then Boaz said to Ruth, "Now listen, my daughter, do not go glean in another field or leave this one, but keep close to my young women. Keep your eyes on the field that is being reaped, and follow behind them. I have ordered the young men not to bother you. If you get thirsty, go to the vessels and drink from what the young men have drawn." Then she fell prostrate, with her face to the ground, and said to him, "Why have I found favor in your sight, that you should take notice of me, when I am a foreigner?" But Boaz answered her, "All that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told me, and how you left your father and mother and your native land and came to a people that you did not know before. May the Lord reward you for your deeds, and may you have full reward from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come for refuge."
Perfect. Great job. Thank you. So Boaz notices that Ruth is out in the field gathering these gleanings. And he says to her, "I know who you are. You're that person from Moab who came back with my relative Naomi. And I've heard about how well you take care of her and how loyal you are to her. And so I want to take care of you too. Feel free to glean as much as you want from my fields. If you need water, get it from my servants who are drawing it. Follow the women who are going around and taking my stuff. I want you to be comfortable here." And so Ruth says, why are you allowing me to do that? I'm a foreigner. I'm not one of your people. You're being so kind to me, and I don't really understand it. And he says, "I know you. Remember, you are the one who has been so faithful to my relative. I want to make sure you are taken care of." So they begin this relationship where Ruth is able to glean from the fields, both for herself and for Naomi. Okay, next section. Who wants to read? Right in the back. Okay, Evan, come on up. All right, let's see. Okay, and this is going to be chapter 3, Ruth chapter 3, verses 1 through 5. That section right there. All right.
Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, "My daughter, I need to seek some security for you so that it may be well with you. Now here is our kinsman Boaz, with whose young woman you have been working. See, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Now wash and anoint yourself and put on your best clothes and go down to the threshing floor, but do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, observe the place where he lies, then go, uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do." She said to her, "All that you tell me, I will do."
Great. Thank you, Evan. Now, this is kind of strange. Oh, I need that back, Evan. Thanks. This is kind of strange, right? So Naomi says to Ruth, "Look, I need to find some security for you here. So what I want you to do is, I know that Boaz is going to be threshing grain on his floor. I want you to go and while you're there, lie down at his feet and he'll tell you what to do." Ruth has no idea what's going on with this. She's like, "Okay, this is kind of a weird thing, but I trust you, Naomi. You're the one who knows what's going on in this land. I'm outside. I don't really know what's going on. I will do what you tell me to do." Question, or you want to read? You want to read? Come on up. You got the next section. All right. So we're on to the last page. Okay, so this is going to be verses 6 through 11. Chapter 3, verses 6 through 11.
So when she
You got it.
So when she went down to the threshing floor and did just as her mother-in-law had instructed her, when Boaz had eaten and drunk, and he was in
Contented?
contented mood, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. When she came quietly and uncovered his feet and lie down, at midnight the man was startled and turned over. No.
Mm-hmm. Yep, you got it. And there, right here.
And there lying at his feet was a woman. He said, "Who are you?" And she answered, "I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your cloak over your servant, for you are next of kin." He said, May you be blessed by the Lord. My daughter has instant of your loyalty. Of your loyalty is better than the first. You have not gone after young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, do not be afraid. I will do for you all that you ask, for all that the assembly of people know that you are a worthy woman.
Perfect. Thank you, Chastity. So, Ruth does what Naomi asks her to do, and she goes and lies down, and Boaz says, "Who are you?" He says, "I'm I'm Ruth, and Naomi told me to be here." And what this is, in the culture of the time, is kind of saying, "I want to marry you." Ruth's basically asking Boaz to take care of her and marry her. And he says, "Okay, I see what's going on, and you are indeed someone who I have so much respect for. I see how you take care of Naomi. You are a worthy person. All my relatives know you are a worthy person. I will do for you as you ask." One more section of reading. Let's see, who wants to read? Anybody else back here? All right, you got it. Come on up. And this is chapter 4. We're jumping ahead a bit. Chapter 4, verses 13 through 17, which is kind of the culmination of this particular part of the story. And this also will tell us a little bit about how this story ties into the lineage of King David. All right, so chapter 4, verses...
Right here?
Let's see here. Verses 13 through 17. So 13 through 17.
All right. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. When they came together, the Lord made her conceive, and she bore a son. Then the woman said to Naomi, "Blessed with the Lord, who has not left you this day. Without the next kin, his name be renowned to Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is more than 7 sons, has borne him." Then Naomi took the child and laid him in her bosom and became his nurse. The woman of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, "A son has been born to Naomi." The name from Obed, and became the father of Jesse, the father of David.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, so Boaz and Ruth get married, and they end up having a son. And this is a great boon not only for Ruth, but for Naomi as well, because now she has what's called the next of kin, right? In that culture, that was how someone's lineage got passed on, was by having your relatives have children. And so now there is this Obed, who is the son of Ruth and the grandson of Naomi, who is then the father of Jesse. Do you guys remember who Jesse is? David's father. That's right. So this is how Ruth, who is this outsider, totally outside of the realm of the people of Israel, becomes related not only into the family of Israel, but becomes the ancestor of one of their greatest kings. Now, I have a video and all that other stuff, but we really don't have enough time because I want to make sure you guys have some small group time together. So I'm just going to jump ahead and we're going to pull this all together to say that, what do you guys think is the important part of the story? Why is this story in the Bible? What does this mean? What's Martin Luther's question here? Why is this so important? Why is the story of Ruth important? Yes? I love it. This is a story of faith, right? Where Ruth goes to a place where she has no idea what it's going to be like. She doesn't know anybody there. She doesn't even know much about God. She's not putting faith a lot in God right now. She's saying, I know you, Naomi, and if your God is so good to take care of you, I want to be in that too. I want to be part of that. So she has this faith to go and be a part of what happens in Bethlehem, which turns out to be the city of David, which in turn turns out to be the city of Jesus. So that's a big part of it. Anything else? Anything else that stands out to people about this story? To me, what seems to be so important about the story, and that's a really big piece of it, is the faith piece, but also the fact that Ruth is someone who is totally unrelated to the people of God, right? Especially at this time in that place, that was a really big deal. You couldn't just become part of another kingdom. These ethnicities were really kind of set in stone. And if you weren't part of the kingdom of God, if you weren't part of the family of Israel, you weren't part of the family of Israel, period. But this shows that God's vision was far larger than that. It wasn't just about the tribes that were set and the borders that were set, that anyone who comes to be a part of the family of God is welcome. Even this person who was totally from a different group of people, who had no standing, who comes to be the relative of one of the greatest kings of Israel. So I'm going to put the rest of the stuff in the back burner. I think we guys kind of got an idea of the story. I want to make sure you have some small group time tonight. I'm sorry that's taking it a little bit longer. So I'm going to have you guys break off into your small groups now and go do a little bit more about Ruth. So next week, we'll see you out on the tubing slopes.